There are moments in life when something within you shifts, quietly, without fanfare. It is not announced by thunder or lightning, but by a silence so deep it unsettles your soul. This is the threshold, an invisible point of no return where the person you once were begins to dissolve, and the person you are meant to become starts to emerge. It doesn't happen with a single dramatic event, but rather with a subtle, irreversible transformation, a line crossed not with footsteps, but with awareness. One day, the familiar ways of living no longer fit, and suddenly you see yourself standing at the edge of a path you cannot ignore. This crossing marks the beginning of a new existence, one that is richer, more conscious, and far more demanding of truth. To recognize that you have crossed such a threshold requires courage. It is an act of honesty to admit that the life you once lived no longer serves you, that the structures which once felt secure now appear as cages. And though the world around you may look the same, something fundamental has changed inside. Carl Jung spoke of this moment as part of individuation, the great process by which the human soul steps out of shadow and into authenticity. It is not simply a psychological event. It is an initiation, one that ancient cultures often recognized in ritual form. Among the Greeks, initiates of the Eleusinian mysteries were said to pass through symbolic death and rebirth, emerging with new eyes to perceive life. In medieval Europe, knighthood demanded a vigil through the night, where the initiate sat alone in silence until dawn, crossing from one identity into another. Across civilizations, this moment has been acknowledged as a sacred transformation, a passage from old self to true self. In your own life, it might not come with ceremonial robes or sacred torches, but the essence is the same. It begins when you can no longer accept superficial answers, when the comforts that once lulled you into complacency now feel like illusions. That subtle unrest, that unshakable sense that something more is calling, is the first indication that the threshold has been crossed. This awakening does not arrive as comfort. It often comes as unease, a strange disillusionment with everything that once gave you peace. The meals, the routines, even the conversations that once satisfied begin to feel hollow, like echoes of a life that no longer belongs to you. The soul, restless and insistent, pushes against the walls of your old identity, demanding to be heard. Yet in this unease lies the hidden gift, for what you are feeling is the stir of transformation, the vibration of a deeper, more authentic life calling you forward. It is an awakening that reverberates not only in thought, but in body, in heart, and in spirit. And once that call has begun, there is no going back. The ancients would have called this a rite of passage. Jung would call it individuation. But for you, it may simply feel like stepping into the unknown, trembling yet resolute. For this threshold is not an end, but a beginning, a doorway into the uncharted territory of the self. The first unmistakable sign that you've crossed the threshold is disillusionment. It is the moment you realize you can no longer live the way you once did. The habits, beliefs, and patterns that once held your world together begin to unravel, losing their meaning. It is as if the scaffolding of your identity, the routines that once gave you stability, has begun to collapse under its own weight. At first, it feels like confusion. You may ask yourself, why don't these things satisfy me anymore? Why does life feel so thin, so strangely hollow? This is the discomfort of awakening. It is the whisper of the soul that refuses to let you settle for surface answers. Carl Jung described this as the beginning of individuation, the process by which the self separates from the shadows of the past and begins to move toward its true essence. The moment you no longer find satisfaction in superficiality is the moment your deeper self begins to stir. And though it can feel like loss, it is in fact an invitation to authenticity. History offers countless mirrors to this experience. Augustine of Hippo, one of the great minds of late antiquity, lived a youth immersed in pleasures, power, and intellectual pride. Yet one day the comforts of the old life turned to ash in his mouth. In that disillusionment he heard a deeper call, one that led him to write Confessions, a work still studied centuries later as a testimony of transformation. Siddhartha, the prince of Kapilavastu, grew restless in his palace surrounded by every pleasure and luxury. Yet what once gave comfort soon became suffocating. His old life, built on gold and comfort, suddenly felt like a cage. That disillusionment was the seed of his journey to become the Buddha. These stories, though distant in time, mirror the same human truth, that awakening begins with dissatisfaction. The structures that once sheltered you suddenly become prisons, and you begin to feel a subtle but insistent pull towards something greater, something that cannot be named but can be felt in every fiber of your being. This inner disillusionment is not a weakness. It is the soul's rebellion against falsehood. It is the refusal to live on the surface of life when you are meant to plunge into its depths. And so, even as fear whispers that you are leaving behind safety, your spirit whispers that you are moving toward truth. But the shift is rarely comfortable. You may feel torn between two worlds, the old one that no longer fits, and the new one not yet visible. Friends and family may not understand. Society may encourage you to cling to the familiar, yet the unrest inside you keeps building. Like a tide that cannot be held back, it pushes you forward, away from what you have known. It feels like a breaking, but it is also a beginning. In the language of myth, it is the crumbling of the old temple to make way for the new. In your own life, it may look like leaving a career, ending a relationship, or even just waking up one morning with the certainty that the path ahead must be different. This is the first sign, disillusionment with the old self, and though it feels like loss, it is the birth cry of transformation. You are no longer who you once were, and you can never again be satisfied with the illusions that once kept you asleep. When the old life begins to crumble, what follows feels very much like death. It is not the death of the body, but of the self you once carried like a second skin. Beliefs that once defined you fall away. Identities that once seemed unshakable dissolve. You stand in the ruins of what you thought you were, uncertain and exposed. It is here that many turn back, longing for the familiar comfort of the past. Yet if you endure this symbolic death, what emerges is far greater. For the collapse of the old self is also the soil in which authenticity takes root. Carl Jung often emphasized that individuation requires confrontation with the shadow, those repressed, unacknowledged aspects of the psyche. To shed the old identity is painful because it means acknowledging the illusions you once built your life upon. But Jung insisted that only by facing this death can the true self be born. Cultures across history have captured this same truth. The myth of the phoenix, the great bird consumed by flame only to rise anew from its own ashes, is not a fable of destruction, but of transformation. In Norse mythology, even the gods themselves face Ragnarok, the twilight of the world, only for a new order to emerge from the wreckage. Death and rebirth are the eternal rhythm of existence. So too with the human soul. When you let go of what no longer serves you, it often feels like the end of everything you've known. Careers dissolve, relationships falter, dreams you once clung to suddenly feel lifeless. You grieve them as if grieving the death of an old friend. And in a way, you are, for that old version of you has reached its end. But hidden within that grief is a profound liberation. When something dies, space opens. And in that space, something new, truer, more radiant, is born. It may not appear overnight. The rebirth comes quietly, often disguised as small shifts, a new value rising within you, a subtle clarity in your decisions, a lightness in your step where once there was heaviness. Imagine the caterpillar in its cocoon. From the outside, it appears dead, motionless. Yet inside, It is dissolving completely, breaking down into formlessness before reshaping into a butterfly. Such is the soul's journey in this threshold, a descent into darkness so that transformation can take place. Yes, it feels like loss, but it is also liberation. For in the death of the false self lies the possibility of the authentic self. This is not destruction for its own sake. It is the sacred rhythm of renewal. Something old must die so that something true can finally live. You begin to feel values rising within you that you did not recognize before. Compassion replaces ambition. Integrity outweighs approval. Silence becomes richer than noise. These are the first breaths of the reborn self, the signs that what has died is already giving birth to something greater. And though the road ahead is uncertain, one truth becomes clear. The death you feared was not an end, but a doorway into the life you were always meant to live. The second sign that you have crossed the threshold is the awakening of intuition. It is not that the world outside has become less chaotic. It is that the world inside has begun to radiate a new clarity. The noise of doubt, the endless spirals of uncertainty, begin to fade. In their place arises a quiet, unwavering voice, subtle yet undeniable, guiding you toward what is true. This guidance does not arrive in grand revelations. It speaks in whispers, in small certainties before difficult choices, in the calm that settles over you when you follow the path that feels aligned, even if it defies logic. Jung called this the emergence of archetypal wisdom, the deep, timeless knowledge stored in the unconscious, rising into consciousness to guide the individual toward wholeness. What once required endless analysis now feels simple. A decision that would have once left you paralyzed in doubt now feels illuminated by an inner lantern. This is the moment your intuition begins to awaken fully, not as superstition, but as the voice of your own deepest self. Throughout history, seekers have spoken of this awakening. In Taoist philosophy, there is Wu Wei, the art of effortless alignment, of acting without force, guided by the natural flow of the universe. Among Native American traditions, vision quests sent the young into solitude, not to hear the voices of others, but to hear the quiet inner voice that reveals destiny. Across cultures, this deep trust in inner knowing has always been regarded as sacred. As you cross this threshold, life begins to reveal itself in new ways. You notice synchronicities, strange alignments of events that whisper you are on the right path. A book appears in your hands at the exact moment you need it. A stranger's words echo the very thought you carried in silence. Coincidences no longer feel random. They feel like a secret language spoken between your soul and the universe. This intuitive clarity is not about escaping challenges. Life does not suddenly become free of hardship, but your relationship to those challenges shifts. You no longer collapse under fear or confusion. You move forward with a grounded confidence, trusting that even if the road ahead is uncertain, something wiser within you knows the way. Jung understood this as the unconscious revealing its wisdom, a crucial stage in individuation. He taught that archetypes, those universal patterns of human experience, live in the deep layers of the psyche. When intuition awakens, it is often these archetypes that surface: the guide, the healer, the warrior, the sage. They are not abstract figures. They are living symbols within you, offering strength and direction. This awakening also transforms your relationship with yourself. Where once you doubted, now you listen. Where once you sought validation from others, now you trust the quiet certainty that rises from within. And in this trust lies freedom, the freedom to walk your path without apology. The awakening of intuition is not the end of your transformation. It is the compass that will carry you through it. It is the voice reminding you, even in the storm, that you are not lost. It is the proof that the threshold you have crossed is real, and that your soul has aligned with a deeper current of life. Once awakened, intuition does not vanish. It deepens. It becomes a steady and loyal companion, a compass pointing you toward alignment even when every outer map fails. The world may still be unpredictable, the future still unknown, but the inner voice grows clearer. You begin to act not from fear or obligation, but from a grounded certainty that transcends logic. This is not about rejecting reason. Logic remains useful, but it is no longer the master of your choices. Instead, it serves intuition, the quiet knowing that sees farther than rational calculation. Where the mind measures, intuition perceives. Where reason hesitates, intuition acts. In this space, the decisions you make begin to feel different. Perhaps you walk away from a career that once defined you, even though others call it madness. Perhaps you move across the world without being able to explain why, except that you know you must. Or perhaps it is something quieter, choosing peace over argument, silence over noise, stillness over distraction. These are not accidents. They are the soul guiding you with a wisdom beyond words. And though society rarely honors this, history quietly proves it true. So many who have transformed the world did not follow the expected path. Mystics, prophets, artists, and leaders often acted against the grain of their time, guided by an inner compass that could not be explained yet could not be denied. Joan of Arc claimed she heard voices guiding her, and though mocked by her enemies, she marched with conviction into history. Gandhi followed what he called his inner law, even when it meant standing against an empire. Their lives testify to the power of trusting an unseen guide. In everyday life, this trust is no less powerful. A mother who knows when to comfort her child before the child speaks. A traveler who avoids danger by trusting a feeling. An artist who creates something timeless by following inspiration rather than instruction, all reveal the same truth. Intuition is the language of the soul. Carl Jung insisted that this inner compass was essential to individuation. He called it the emergence of archetypes, the timeless guides of the human psyche. To meet these guides is to enter a dialogue with the deepest part of yourself, a dialogue that clarifies your path and illuminates your purpose. But to trust this compass requires courage. The modern world teaches us to doubt our inner knowing, to rely only on facts and data, to silence the quiet voice with noise. To follow intuition, then, is an act of rebellion. It is a declaration that you will not live by borrowed truths, but by the wisdom of your own soul. The more you listen, the clearer it becomes. The more you trust, the stronger it grows. And soon, intuition ceases to feel like a whisper at all. It feels like a steady flame, guiding you step by step into alignment with your essence. It will not remove uncertainty, but it will transform your relationship with it. Where once you feared the unknown, now you see it as a field of possibility. Where once you hesitated, now you move with quiet conviction. For you know that even if the world doubts you, the compass of your soul does not. The third sign that you have crossed the threshold is a profound detachment, not the cold indifference of apathy, but the conscious release of what no longer serves you. It is the ability to let go without bitterness, to walk away without fear, and to trust that life itself will continue to unfold in its own rhythm. At first, this detachment can feel unsettling. For so long, you may have clung to people, possessions, and roles as anchors of stability. But when awakening arrives, these attachments begin to loosen. The very things that once gave you comfort start to feel heavy, restrictive, almost like chains. And slowly, without even trying, you begin to release them. Carl Jung described this as a sign of spiritual maturity, the moment when the ego's grasp weakens and the soul expands into freedom. To detach is not to abandon, but to love without clinging. It is to recognize the impermanence of all things and to allow them to flow through your life without resistance. This wisdom is echoed across cultures. The Stoics of ancient Rome taught that peace comes not from controlling events, but from mastering one's response. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that all things are fleeting, that to cling too tightly is to invite suffering. In Buddhism, non-attachment is a central path to liberation, a recognition that desire and grasping are the roots of human suffering. And in Christian ascetic traditions, detachment was seen as a path to purify the soul, to free it from worldly illusions so it could rest more fully in divine truth. In your own life, detachment may appear in simple but profound ways. You may find yourself no longer compelled to win every argument, no longer desperate to be right. You may release relationships that once defined you, not in anger, but with gratitude for what they offered. You may stop chasing achievements that once seemed urgent, realizing they do not carry the meaning you thought they did. This detachment is not indifference. On the contrary, it is a deeper form of love, one that does not seek to control, but allows others and yourself to be free. It is the recognition that true connection does not come from holding on tightly, but from meeting each moment with openness. And with this release comes lightness. The burden of needing to control every outcome falls away. Fear of loss begins to dissolve. You discover a freedom in simply allowing life to move, to change, to transform, without needing to grasp at every detail. As this sign deepens, you begin to see how much energy you once wasted in clinging. The anxieties, the frustrations, the endless attempts to shape life into your image, they all fall away. What remains is a calm presence, an inner stillness that no external storm can easily disturb. And this inner freedom reshapes your outer world. The energy you radiate shifts. You begin attracting relationships and experiences that resonate with your new vibration. People who are not drawn to the old patterns of fear and control, but to the new presence of openness and trust. To detach is to declare, I trust life more than I trust my fear. It is to release the illusion of control and step into alignment with a higher order, one that has always guided you, even when you did not notice. This detachment is not a single act, but a practice. Some days you will cling again, out of habit or fear, but each time you release, you strengthen the soul's freedom. Each act of letting go becomes a sacred gift, clearing space for new growth. And in this release, you discover a truth both humbling and empowering. You never really owned anything. Not people, not possessions, not even the identity you once clung to. Everything was always passing through. And when you accept this, you do not lose. You gain freedom. This is the third sign, detachment and release. It is the soul's quiet declaration that it no longer needs to cling to illusions, that it is ready to live in truth, in lightness, in harmony with the flow of existence. The fourth sign that you have crossed the threshold is a profound shift in how you perceive time and reality. Life no longer feels like a rigid sequence of past, present, and future, but a living tapestry, a weaving of moments where everything is interconnected, where eternity touches the ordinary. What once felt linear now feels circular. Time is no longer a relentless march forward, but a dance, a rhythm, an eternal now. You begin to sense that past, present, and future are not separate corridors, but strands of one thread, woven together in patterns too vast for the mind to fully grasp. Carl Jung called this the numinous experience, a brush with the sacred that expands consciousness into wider dimensions of meaning. In such moments, you realize that reality is not merely physical, not merely measurable, but infused with hidden connections. Symbols and synchronicities appear not as accidents, but as messages, reminders that there is a deeper order guiding your path. Mystics throughout history have spoken of this awakening. Meister Eckhart, the medieval German theologian, wrote that eternity is not endless time, but the present moment lived fully. Rumi, the Sufi poet, spoke of the eternal now as a meeting place where past and future are but shadows. The Mayans conceived of time as cycles, not lines, believing that each moment carried echoes of ages before. Even in modern physics, whispers of this truth emerge. Theories that time may not be absolute but relative, bending and folding in ways beyond our daily perception. When this shift takes root in your consciousness, daily life transforms. A sunrise is no longer just the start of another day. It becomes a timeless symbol of renewal. The laughter of a child carries not only joy, but echoes of innocence stretching back through generations. A single choice feels like part of an eternal pattern, something both infinitely small and infinitely vast. With this awareness, urgency dissolves. You no longer rush to chase life as if it is slipping away. Deadlines lose their grip, schedules feel less like prisons and more like rhythms. You begin to align with the sacred pace of your soul, trusting that everything unfolds at the right time, in the right season. Stress gives way to presence. The ordinary becomes luminous. A meal, a conversation, a walk through the street, each becomes a doorway to eternity, shimmering with meaning. This is not fantasy, it is deeper perception. You are not escaping reality, you are seeing it more fully. And yet this shift also humbles you. For as you see the vastness of the pattern, you realize how small you are within it. But instead of insignificance, you feel belonging. You are not a solitary fragment adrift in chaos. You are part of a larger symphony woven into a design beyond comprehension. This awareness alters your relationship to both past and future. Regrets no longer weigh you down, because you see that every experience, even mistakes and wounds, had its place in the fabric of your becoming. Anxiety about the future eases, for you trust that what is meant to unfold already exists within the larger design. You inhabit the present moment more deeply, knowing it contains everything. Jung believed that such numinous experiences were essential for individuation, for they opened the psyche to higher levels of integration. Without this expansion, we remain trapped in the illusion of fragmentation. With it, we begin to see unity, the wholeness of self and the wholeness of existence. This is the fourth sign, a new perception of time and reality. And once it awakens within you, life itself becomes sacred ground, every moment an opportunity to touch eternity. The fifth sign that you have crossed the threshold is the awakening of purpose. It is the moment when life ceases to be a series of obligations or expectations, and instead becomes an alignment with something far deeper, the call of your soul. At first, this shift can feel subtle, like a quiet voice rising within you. But over time, it grows louder, clearer, until it becomes undeniable. You find yourself less concerned with external approval, less willing to bend to the demands of convention. What once motivated you, money, status, recognition, now feels hollow. In its place arises a yearning to live in harmony with your true essence. Carl Jung understood this awakening as the heart of individuation, the process of becoming who you are meant to be, unshackled from conditioning and fear. He wrote that when the unconscious integrates with the conscious, the individual no longer lives as a fragment of society's expectations, but as a whole being, guided by inner truth. History offers striking examples of this transformation. Joan of Arc was a peasant girl with no reason to believe she had a place in the chronicles of kings and armies. Yet when she heard the call of purpose, she stood before princes and generals, her conviction unshakable. Gandhi, trained as a lawyer, might have lived quietly within the machinery of empire, but an inner law guided him toward a mission that would reshape a nation. These figures remind us that purpose, once awakened, can move mountains, not because of external power, but because of inner certainty. For most, the expression of purpose may not take the form of armies or revolutions, but it is no less profound. It might be the teacher who senses her vocation to awaken young minds, the healer who devotes himself to alleviating suffering, the artist who creates beauty not for applause, but because creation itself is his truth. When you awaken to purpose, every choice begins to carry coherence, every action a quiet integrity. The road is not always easy. Awakening to purpose often means sacrifice. It may mean walking away from a career that no longer resonates, or losing relationships that do not align with your deeper truth. It may mean enduring misunderstanding from those who cannot see the fire that drives you. Yet the inner certainty sustains you. For once you know why you are here, even suffering takes on meaning. This awakening also reshapes your presence in the world. You begin to radiate clarity, and others feel it, even if they cannot name it. Your life ceases to be a reaction to circumstance and becomes a conscious creation. And that authenticity is contagious. It inspires those around you to question, to seek, to awaken to their own call. In this sense, the awakening of purpose is not merely personal, it is collective. When one soul begins to live authentically, it creates ripples that touch others. It is a spark that can ignite fires in unexpected places. This is the fifth sign. You no longer live for borrowed dreams. You live to honor the essence within you, to walk the path your soul has always known. It is not about grandiosity or recognition. It is about truth. And in that truth lies both peace and power. When you recognize these signs, disillusionment with the old self, the death and rebirth of identity, the awakening of intuition, the practice of detachment, the new perception of time, and the discovery of purpose, you begin to see that your soul has already crossed the threshold. There is no going back. The life you once lived is gone, and what lies ahead is transformation without end. This is the paradox of awakening. What feels like loss is, in truth, liberation. The walls of your old identity fall, but in their place rises a structure built of authenticity. The path ahead may be uncertain, but it is yours. No longer imposed by others, no longer dictated by fear, but shaped by the compass of your soul. Carl Jung taught that individuation is not a destination, but a journey, a pilgrimage into wholeness. And like every pilgrimage, it is filled with trials, doubts, and moments of weariness. Yet each step forward deepens your alignment with who you truly are. Every challenge becomes less an obstacle and more a teacher. Every shadow you encounter is no longer something to fear, but a part of you waiting to be integrated. This irreversible journey reshapes everything. Your relationships change because you no longer seek to bind or to be bound. Your perception changes because you no longer see life as random, but as meaningful. Your choices change because they flow not from compulsion, but from authenticity. And slowly, a new self emerges, not a mask, but the true face that had always been hidden beneath. History and myth remind us that this is the eternal pattern of human growth. The initiate leaves the village, enters the wilderness, and returns transformed. The phoenix dies in fire only to rise in flame. Even the earth itself follows this rhythm. The seed must die to give birth to the tree. What you are living is not an accident. It is the universal story of transformation. And while this journey may at times feel lonely, it connects you to something vast. For in crossing this threshold, you step not only into your own authenticity, but into the great stream of human souls who have done the same. Mystics, poets, wanderers, prophets, all once stood where you stand now, trembling yet resolute, stepping into the unknown. You walk with them, whether you realize it or not. Yes, the threshold is irreversible, but in that irreversibility lies your true freedom. You can no longer go back to illusions, but you also no longer need them. You can no longer shrink yourself to fit old molds, but you no longer desire to. What lies ahead is not certainty, but authenticity, and that is far greater. So you continue forward, step by step, into a life more radiant, more conscious, more whole. A life where fear is not absent, but transformed. A life where purpose is not borrowed, but born from within. A life where every breath, every choice, every encounter becomes sacred ground. This is the irreversible journey of awakening. The point of no return is not an ending. It is a beginning. The beginning of the life your soul has always longed to live.